The wind shifted just before dawn, carrying with it the scent of horses, leather and distant smoke, and Elias felt it before he heard anything. He was standing near the corral, checking the fence he had repaired the night before, when the ground itself seemed to tighten beneath his boots, as if the earth was holding its breath. The desert was never truly silent, but this was different. No birds, no insects, only a low, steady vibration that crawled up his legs and settled in his chest. He straightened slowly, hand resting on the rough wood of the post, eyes lifting toward the narrow pass that led to his homestead. That was when he saw them. At first, they looked like shadows stretched long by the rising sun. But then the shapes sharpened into men, horses, and weapons, an unbroken line spreading across the mouth of the pass like a living wall. Apache riders, dozens of them, sat tall in their saddles, faces painted, lances and rifles catching the early light. They did not charge, they did not shout. They simply stopped, shoulder to shoulder, horse to horse, forming a silent barrier at his gate. Elias's breath caught, and for a moment, every decision he had ever made seemed to rush back at once, especially the one he had made 3 weeks earlier beside the river. He remembered that day with painful clarity. The sun had been brutal, the river swollen from distant storms. When he heard the cries, thin, desperate, carried on the wind, most men would have kept riding. The territory was unforgiving, and Apache lands were no place for a lone settler to interfere. But Elias had followed the sound and found the two girls clinging to a half-submerged log, their fine clothes torn, fear wide in their dark eyes. They were young, daughters of the Apache chief, though he had not known it then. All he had seen were 2 lives slipping away. He had cut his rope, waded into the rushing water, and pulled them free one at a time, fighting the current until his arms burned and his lungs screamed. He had given them water, covered them with his coat, and guided them back toward their people, never asking for reward, never giving his name. He had left before the warriors arrived, believing that anonymity was the safest kindness of all. Now standing before that same people, Elias wondered if he had been wrong. The riders remained motionless, their presence overwhelming. Dust rose softly beneath their horses' hooves, hanging in the air like a veil. Elias's hand drifted toward his rifle, then stopped. He forced himself to step forward, past the worn gate into the open. Fear hammered in his chest, but beneath it was something steadier, a quiet acceptance. He had done what was right. If this was the price, he would face it standing. The lead rider shifted then, a tall man with silver threaded through his black hair, eyes sharp as flint. With a single measured gesture, he raised his hand. The line parted just enough for him to ride forward alone. Each step of the horse felt like a drumbeat. When the man stopped a few paces away, Elias could see the weight of authority in the way he sat, in the stillness of his gaze. This was the chief. Elias lowered his eyes briefly, not in submission but in respect. The chief studied him for a long moment, and the silence stretched so tight it hurt. Then in a voice deep and calm, he spoke Elias's name. Hearing it sent a chill through him. He had never given it, yet they knew. The chief continued, speaking of the river, of the storm, of 2 daughters pulled from death by a stranger who asked for nothing. As the words flowed, Elias felt the weight in his chest shift, not lifting, but changing shape. The chief's eyes did not burn with anger. They held something heavier, judgment balanced with gratitude. He explained that among his people, a debt of life was sacred. Such a debt could not be ignored nor repaid lightly. The riders behind him were not there for vengeance. They were there because honor demanded witness. At another signal, the line of riders moved as one, advancing just a few steps, enough to make the earth tremble again. Elias stood his ground, heart pounding, every instinct screaming, yet something in the chief's presence anchored him. The chief raised his hand once more, and the riders stopped. He spoke of protection, of a promise made before the ancestors. The man who saved the chief's daughters would never stand alone on this land. As long as Elias lived here in peace, no Apache blade or bullet would ever be raised against him. Any who threatened him would answer to the tribe. The words hit harder than any threat could have. Elias felt his throat tighten. He had expected death, or at best, a warning. Instead, he was being offered something rarer than gold in the frontier: belonging. The chief dismounted then, a gesture that drew a collective breath from the riders. He stepped forward and placed a hand over his heart, then extended it. Elias hesitated only a second before clasping it, feeling the strength in that grip. The weight of an oath passed between two men from different worlds. As the sun climbed higher, the tension eased, though the gravity of the moment remained. The riders did not linger long. One by one they turned their horses, reforming that living wall only long enough to seal the promise in memory. Then they were gone, the dust slowly settling where they had stood. Elias remained where he was, the quiet rushing back in, his life forever altered. He did not know then how far that promise would reach, how many times it would be tested, or how deeply it would bind his fate to the Apache people. And if this moment already has your heart beating, if you feel the weight of honor, courage, and destiny pressing in, remember, stories like this only grow stronger as they continue. Subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because what happens next will test that promise in ways no one could have imagined. And Chapter 2 will reveal just how powerful a debt of life can truly be. Promise the Apache chief did not sleep quietly. In the dust, after the riders left, it walked beside Elias in every sunrise and followed him into every shadowed evening. At first, life seemed unchanged. He repaired fences, tended his animals, and spoke to no one but the wind. Yet the land itself felt different, as if unseen eyes now watched, not with suspicion, but with guardianship. When traders passed through the valley, they greeted Elias with unusual respect. Some whispered that Apache scouts had been seen on the ridges whenever strangers lingered too long near his homestead. Elias never saw them, but he felt their presence, steady and silent, like a shield formed of breath and earth. Trouble came in the form of men who did not believe in honor. A small band of raiders, drawn by rumors of a lone settler with good land and poor defenses, rode in under the cover of night. They cut the corral rope and moved toward the house, thinking fear would make Elias surrender. Instead, a warning cry split the darkness, not from Elias, but from the hills. Shadows moved faster than the raiders could react. Arrows flew with deadly precision, striking weapons from hands, pinning cloaks to the ground. Horses screamed and bolted. By the time the raiders understood what was happening, they were surrounded by Apache warriors who had appeared like spirits from the stone itself. Elias stepped onto his porch, stunned, as the chief himself emerged from the darkness. No blood was spilled that night. The message was enough. The raiders were stripped of their weapons and sent away alive, carrying fear instead of loot. The chief met Elias's eyes and nodded once. A silent reminder, a life saved binds many lives to it. This was not charity, it was law. Word spread fast across the frontier. Some settlers still feared Elias, believing he had made a dangerous pact. Others sought his counsel, hoping to understand the balance he walked between two worlds. Elias never claimed power. He spoke only of choice, of the moment, by the river when he chose to act instead of turn away. That single act reshaped his destiny and proved that courage does not always roar. Sometimes it reaches out a hand when it would be easier not to. Years later, when Elias grew old and his hands shook too much for hard labor, Apache riders still passed near his home, slowing as they rode by, offering food, protection, and respect. When he finally died, the valley was silent again, but not empty. On the ridge above his grave, riders stood at dawn, forming one last wall, honoring a man who had saved 2 lives and, in doing so, built a bridge between enemies. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that one good decision can echo across generations, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of courage, honor, and unexpected destiny, because the next story might just change the way you see the world.